Let's get into some of what this actually means for the rest of the country here in these United States and abroad. So you're going to need someone a little bit more learned on this than I am. I know, very, very hard to believe. So we're going to bring on the one and the only Andreas Martinez-Fernandez. He's the senior policy analyst for Latin America at the Heritage Foundation. So he reads this stuff all the time in English and in Spanish. Andreas, busy weekend, huh?
Definitely quite an eventful start of the year.
So let's get right into it. Not futz around anymore. There's been the quibbling, the complaining from some isolated parts of the country that what does this have to do with America first? Take it.
Well, I think it has everything to do with America first, and that's protecting the American people from live, active, and deadly threats in our own hemisphere. People like to say that this is just like nation building in the Middle East and all the mistakes that we've made in the past with our foreign policy.
Right. Anyone I don't like is a neocon, and other stories to tell yourself.
Right, exactly. But you know what? The reality is that the Venezuelan narco threat and the narco threats within our own hemisphere, which are by far the most dramatic and deadly for the American people,
Right.
we're talking about 100,000 overdose deaths a year from narcotics alone, and that's not even getting into the weaponization of migration and instability that the American people and American cities have lived with for years. All of this has really been ignored by the Washington establishment for decades. You've never really seen a serious attention as far as the foreign policy priorities of the United States to these issues until President Trump decided that he's going to break with that really what's a noxious practice of ignoring these core security threats to the United States. And again, this is what affects Middle America far more than what happens in parts of the Middle East, is in Europe. This is our hemisphere. This is where we live, and ignoring that in prioritization of issues that some of the establishment prefers to focus on has had deadly consequences for the American people.
There's definitely no denying that. I do want to ask, of course, we could talk about the ladies on The View and their opposition to this. Oh, it's piracy. Oh, it's kidnapping. But we are adults in the room. We'll let the toddlers run off and yell at each other. So in all seriousness, there was a lot of Russia outposting, a lot of Xi Jinping's China outposting in Venezuela. This was a launching point for a lot of the precursor chemicals that we saw going sky high in a lot of those beautiful MQ-9 and naval strikes happening on those narco boats. Something that I just can't stop watching. It's too enjoyable to watch narco and human traffickers going sky high. But with that particular foreign intervention in the region, China and Russia, they got out the sabers and they started shaking them. We're talking shaking them like skeletons at a spirit Halloween. So what in the world does this actually mean for us? Are we actually going to see any intervention at all, or any diplomatic snub-nosing that's going to be worth anything? Or is the UN going to yell for 30 seconds and it be over?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of posturing that we're seeing and going to continue to see from entities like the UN and certainly our adversaries, which have in Russia and China, Iran, used Venezuela as an outpost in our hemisphere to undermine our interests and undermine our security. So they're very upset to lose that outpost, which I think they're very much on the way to doing. Nicolas Maduro had opened up not only his oil industry and essentially handed that over to Havana, China, Russia, and Iran, but he's also opened up Venezuela's national territory, which again, the distance between Venezuela and the U.S. mainland is equivalent to the distance between New York and Texas. This is right in our neighborhood, and there's nothing between us except for open waters. So that's left us vulnerable, and it means we need to address that, particularly when hostile foreign powers like China and Russia are operating there.
One of the benefits about actually talking to someone who studies these things in detail up close rather than just your broad 30,000 foot influencer, you can tell me when someone says arms manufacturing for foreign terrorist organizations or foreign powers happen in Venezuela, what kind of things was Venezuela putting together? Not just, crude oil and jerry cans, because obviously they couldn't refine it. What kind of weapons was Venezuela participating in manufacturing?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of weapons that were transferred, certainly to the narco trafficking groups in our hemisphere. Venezuela and the Venezuelan regime made itself a proactive partner of these groups. And as a result, saw a significant amount of Venezuelan military weaponry making its way into their hands. And they used that to ensure that they could produce and traffic drugs to the United States and elsewhere. So that was again a key aspect of that relationship. And it's not just the weapons. There was actually public resources, including institutions like the public oil utility, even state-owned aircraft that were used in furtherance of narco trafficking activity. So it's been a broad cooperation that you saw there. And then
They
with
did in
respect,
manufacturing suicide drones and Hezbollah equipment, didn't they? Or am I? Or
yeah,
is that Colombia?
there was quite a bit of partnership, particularly with Iran, on the development of that capacity, and a lot of this was focused on, much of this was really looking at trying to pretend that Venezuela's regime is still powerful enough to hold off the United States military, which it absolutely wasn't, as we
Oh,
saw proven.
gotcha.
This was a regime that it's not even a paper tiger. It just folded immediately when faced with the strength of the U.S. military, and that's that calls the bluff of what the Venezuelan regime has been doing for years, which is saying that they can thumb their nose and attack and undermine the United States and stability in our region, and we can't do anything about it because they're so powerful. That's just not the case.
Sure. I mean, obviously, when you have the Cuban Praetorian Guard who's walking you around, and you have Chinese officials caught in the crossfire. I mean, it's pathetic. I've seen subprime military contracting agencies on their last leg that were better suited than these goofballs. But that's not a fair comparison. Maybe the French. I've seen better French troops than what's been going on there. No, in all seriousness, one of the core issues on a lot of Americans' minds is how much this is going to cost the American over a period of time. Obviously, there are some who aren't serious, who are suggesting this is going to cause a second migration wave to the United States, which I don't necessarily see that. Maybe they're seeing something that I'm not. But a lot of people also have the concern that we're now going to be giving a bunch of aid to propping up a new regime in Venezuela. What does the future look like, as much as you can gaze into your crystal ball of studies here? What are we seeing in the next couple of months that we should be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think that that's going to be the case as far as a massive bill to the American taxpayer for reconstructing Venezuela. First of all, it's important to note that right now we don't have anything like an occupying force in Venezuela. What we have done is very specifically targeted the ringleader of a transnational narco terrorist group, which was Nicolas Maduro, and taking him off the table. And now we can use the pressure tools that we have, including sanctions, including the threat of further action, and political pressure, to make sure that the remnants of that regime don't fall back into that practice of undermining U.S. national security, and that instead they halt narco trafficking, that they halt hosting the most dangerous adversaries of the United States with a base in our hemisphere. And that they go on a path to a transition, which is going to also restore stability and democracy in Venezuela. We can do those things through lower cost tools than we saw in Iraq. And I think a lot of that is external pressure. But there's also a lot of resources that can be brought to bear that don't have to come directly from the American taxpayer. First of all, Venezuela is the country with the largest oil reserves in the world. Venezuela hasn't been able to tap into that because this regime, socialist regime, is so incompetent and corrupt that they haven't been able to even maintain an operating oil industry. So limited investments there can help finance that.
I'm sorry, I missed it. This reminds me of Zimbabwe, This is just the nations that take over for whether it's social revolution or whether it's a racial revolution or some type of populist uprising that leans socialisty.
Hmm.
It immediately realizes, man, driving all of the talent out of the country and stealing all of their stuff is really bad. Jim, do you know what in the world this machine needs to work? You don't either? Well, shoot. I mean, it's really tragic, but at the same time, again, I'm glad that the presidential administration's not making any bones about how this is going to benefit Americans. This is what I want to get your take on. That I don't know whether you want to call this, child fanciful, whatever, of seeing the U.S. military be absolutely incredible, or looking at the Trump administration gunning after the most impressive foreign policy legacy that it can fathom. How likely, and I mean realistically here, not just for the show of the interview. How likely do you think it is that by the end of the Trump administration, we see some kind of similar strike in either Colombia, probably less so Cuba?
Oh, I would reverse those. I would say, I
Really?
think, yeah. Colombia. So here's the thing about Colombia. Colombia's been for decades our strongest partner on narco trafficking and security. The issue is that about 3 years ago, they elected a socialist former guerrilla. This was in a bout of populist discontent with the ruling class there.
To be fair, he's got quite the nose for cocaine. No pun intended.
He's awful. He's awful. But
exactly.
the fact is that Colombia has much stronger institutions than Venezuela had,
I mean,
and
more established, like they're more able to weather the storm, or people trust them more. What do you mean?
that's
Sorry,
right.
that's actually for me. I'm not trying to be clear
Yeah.
for the audience. I'm just being transparent.
No, yeah, that they're able to weather the storm of a socialist, anti-American leader coming to power in their country.
The cultural institutions, then.
Yes,
Okay,
and
got you.
political
Thank you.
institutions. You've seen the independence of the Congress, and also of electoral institutions and judicial institutions. All of those withstand the kind of malign pressure that Gustavo Petro has tried to
Last
enlist there.
vestiges of Gran Colombia, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, but this is important because it's such a dramatically different path that Colombia has faced in the wake of electing a leader like this than Venezuela saw. Thankfully, and the elections that are coming up there later this year are very likely
Presidential
to see.
elections in Colombia are later this year.
Presidential elections in Colombia are very likely to deliver a far more pro-U.S. moderate and potentially stalwart conservative leader to that country.
The two questions that I have on that are, number one, is this a situation in which local and regional partners, like, for example, the socialist Brazilian government, might attempt some kind of foreign influence, or the libertarian right-leaning Argentine conservative government putting a little bit of pressure there? And then on top of that, I'm sorry, I'm just curious now, you've piqued my interest. Is it an electoral college system-ish kind of vote, or is it a national popular winner take all kind of vote?
We're talking about Colombia, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Colombia. So it is a full kind of national vote. So not a electoral college kind of.
I figured
system.
those are so rare, but I thought I would check just to be safe.
Yeah. So there's certainly a history of this kind of subtle intervention in politics by left leaning and socialist individuals and countries in Latin America. You saw,
Yeah, it's like an export and an import for the continent.
yeah, it's like the only thing that they're able to export, really, which is interesting. But yeah, I do think there's going to be a desire. We've seen a rise of conservative leaders across Latin America over the past several months, winning elections in Chile, in Argentina, in Honduras, Bolivia, El Salvador before that, and there's a lot of concern from the left, which has been in control of a lot of Latin America for a while, that if they continue to lose, then there may be no coming back for them. them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that there is an operation by whether it's some of these leaders that remain of the far left in Latin America, or even extra hemispheric actors like China to prop up the left in these elections.
You knew exactly where my thoughts were headed. China obviously has to be panicking right now because for their Belt and Road Initiative, if there's nothing for the belt to move and there's no place for the road to go, it doesn't matter if they have a little tiny foothold in some small micro state in Central America the size of Rhode Island. It doesn't matter because, again, if the belt can't carry anything because the United States is watching and its partners, like you mentioned with El Salvador, are keeping an eye on things. And then the road has nowhere to go, whether we're talking about Colombia or Venezuela or Argentina, or then, of course, all through Central America. That's an opportunity for, again, the Monroe Doctrine to reach a fulsome point. And that's exciting. I mean, you and I haven't necessarily chatted a lot. Normally, I'm not on that floor of Heritage when I visit in D.C. But I'm kind of more Teddy Rooseveltian kind of on the style and policy. So in honor of my great uncle riding with the great TR himself on San Juan Hill, one of the only, in fact, on a donkey, not on a horse, although many think it was. Tell me about Cuba. I was really expecting, Rubio said it was more likely to fall. Do you think we just move out from Guantanamo? Help me out here.
Well, no, I do think that Cuba is in dire straits after losing potentially this patron state, which Venezuela has been, just offering up massive amounts of oil wealth to prop up Cuba for
ironic
years.
Given that it was once the patron state to the Soviet Union.
Right, exactly. So this is kind of the period that they're facing, which is, you mentioned the Soviet Union. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba faced a massive destabilization and economic crisis because of that collapse and losing that economic support that the Soviet Union was offering. And it was only the rise of the socialist regime in Venezuela that helped to restore a measure of stability for the regime.
Kind of like a bastardized colonization of resources. Like they were able to basically take some of the raw resources from Venezuela and then bring them in to prop up the economy, kind of like the late stage of Nazi Germany in a kind of a weird import the resources to drain it kind of way.
That's right. And in exchange, what the Venezuelan regime got was substantial intelligence support, political alignment, and security for Nicolas Maduro. I don't know if you saw, there was an announcement from the Cuban government that 32 Cubans were killed in the U.S. military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro. That tells you all you know. I mean, what are 32 Cubans, and that's just the ones that were killed. What are 32 Cubans doing guarding the head of not Cuba? It's a big sign of the role that they were playing in Venezuela and elsewhere.
Well, this is just like that patron state relationship between the Soviet Union and Cuba, the Soviet Union stationing troops in Cuba so that if we ever were to invade Cuba and likely kill a Soviet officer, then that would be cause belli for war. And that didn't seem to help Venezuela all that much. Unfortunately.
That's right.
Well, I got to say, thanks for answering a couple more of the questions on this for me. I know we're over time, but I can't help it. I got to know some of the ins and outs, and I like the guys that are actually content experts who know the ground or at least have read enough of it so I know they're not making it up on the spot like some that we share airtime with in this general sphere. So really, really do appreciate your hopping on. Andres Martinez-Fernandez, Senior Policy Analyst, Allison Center over at the Heritage Foundation, the Latin American King. I'm not talking about Marco Rubio.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.